Okay, are we live? This Hangout on Air is live. So, welcome everyone to Politics After Dark. I am your host, Rachel Mills, and I am joined this evening by Tom Mullen and Jeffrey Tucker. Tom Mullen is an author and a noted columnist. He writes for Huffington Post. And I've seen your stuff all over the place, Tom. I don't know who all carries your stuff, but it's vast. And of course, Jeffrey Tucker, who is an author and columnist as well, and published everywhere as well. So this is going to be a very good, very enlightening discussion tonight, I think, on well, the excuse for us coming together, which we need a good excuse. The excuse is Tom Mullen's book, Where Do Liberals and Conservatives Come From? Did I get the title right? Where do conservatives and liberals come from, and whatever happened to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Part 1. And I have got the link on Amazon here in my hot little window. I'm going to come over here over to Liberty.me and paste that so you all know where you can get it, but also if you're following along in the conversation, you can look up reviews and look up the synopsis and everything just for your own reference. So there is that. So first things first, Jeffrey Tucker, what are you drinking?
It's my favorite wine. It's Burgundy, put out by Carlo Rossi, which is my favorite wine, and I am not embarrassed to admit it.
A Burgundy.
Yeah, that's what it's called. They have about 13 different varieties. This is my favorite one.
But I take it from your apologies or I don't know, sort of pseudo-apologies that it's a lesser expensive wine?
Yes, it is. It comes in a large jug, and it's looked down upon, and wine merchants discourage people from buying it because if anybody ever tried this and they discovered that it's much better than the more expensive wines, they would just, they would not make any profits whatsoever. So they tend to hide it in the back. Mm-hmm. But I discovered it, probably about 20 years ago, and I didn't see it being offered through retail until very recently. And so when I did, I just dropped every other wine and started drinking it exclusively. But it's an awesome wine. Yeah, it's just delicious. I mean, you don't want to drink it the way you would, any other wine. You need to treat it as like a drink of life rather than some sort of rarefied thing that you need to, sniff and talk about. You should just,
So yeah, it's a glug glug glug, go for it kind of wine.
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
It's a real wine for real people. Yeah, right.
Yeah, my sister-in-law came over for Thanksgiving and she brought me a bottle of the Trader Joe variety, the $2 chuck as they call it.
Yeah, it's very similar.
And she was like so apologetic. It's like this is what I had, and we're rushing out the door, and I'm like, it's good stuff. I don't care how much it costs. It's good. It doesn't matter.
That's right. So. That's right. This is a higher level. I mean, I'm not sure what you would call it. Kind of a reverse snobbery or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's getting ever more. It's on par with buying very nice clothes at the thrift store and that sort of thing. It's kind of a rejection of faux bourgeois culture in favor of a kind of an appreciation of working class habits.
Good value. Good value is always in style.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, what are you drinking? Oh, shoot, I can't hear you, Tom. What happened? I could hear you a minute ago.
I could never hear him. That's the
first no, maybe that was when Jeffrey came on.
Yeah.
Shoot, yeah. Go to the little wheel at the top of the screen and see what it says for microphone. The little settings wheel at the top.
Yeah, make sure. Yeah, sometimes I set mine on default if I've got my headphones in. And sometimes if another program's hugging your mic, you have to actually shut your computer down and restart.
Kill something.
Yeah.
Oh, Tom, this is sad. I thought I could hear you before, but I think it was just Jeffrey.
He's not sad. He's just working on it.
Yeah, he's going to come back.
Okay, yeah.
Meanwhile, I will talk about what I'm drinking.
Okay.
And again, this is my favorite wine.
Okay.
It's Apothic Red, which is a winemaker's red blend. It's from California. It's sort of in the middle. I get it at BJ's for $9 a bottle, or I think $8.29.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
Which is not the cheapest.
Right. That's twice as expensive as Colorado, but you know that's
okay. But yeah, I love it. It's actually a sweeter kind of red. It's got like chocolate and berry overtones, and
very
I like
fancy,
it.
Rachel. I would expect nothing less. Yeah.
And actually, while we're waiting for Tom to come back, I'm going to be in Atlanta, it looks like, this weekend.
Is that right? Will you give me a call?
I will if I have time. I'm actually helping a libertarian candidate down there do a video shoot,
Okay.
Which I'm actually pretty excited about. And depending on how that goes, Leah and Leah's going to help me.
Good.
My friend Leah in Atlanta, we're, we do a lot of theater and entertainment stuff together. Okay. But yeah, I might give you a call if we've got a chance. But
okay. You know, I've got big shopping plans this weekend.
Shopping?
Yeah, and shopping in Atlanta is just incredibly awesome, actually. You know, the malls, the sales, it's just a blast. So. Any
thrift stores?
Well, maybe so. You know, I understand that there's a wonderful Goodwill in Buckhead that everybody's telling me about. I've never been to it, so.
A Goodwill in Buckhead?
Yeah.
That could be incredible.
I know, right? Yeah.
Oh, we should make a video of our own.
I know. We could have some music for it. Got it. $20 in my pocket. Yeah.
We could dress each other. We could pick up clothes for each other. It could be a great thing.
That's right. So
it depends on how this video goes. It could be a disaster. It could be awesome. Who knows?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's my plans for the weekend. So we'll see how it goes.
I am down with shopping if it works out. Tom, speak to me. Damn it!
But his mouth isn't moving, so we don't know if it's working or not.
I know. I think that means he doesn't hear me. Tom.
Or he doesn't. So now
he's frozen.
Neither his audio. Frozen. Oh, he's frozen. Neither his audio nor video.
Let it go.
Neither hearing nor saying nor speaking. So we've got magnified problems. Yeah, that's regrettable.
And we're losing Frank Markopoulos. He's frustrated about our tech, so that's too bad.
Yeah.
But what I will do is, after this is over, I will edit it into a nice video for Facebook and for YouTube with all of the nonsense taken out, and hopefully it'll just be a condensed, very watchable conversation without all the technical difficulties.
Okay. Well, yeah, I saw his head move, so
yeah.
Yeah. Tom's head is moving.
He's waving.
He's waving, so that's some progress, but still no audio.
Ah, shoot. Well, hopefully we'll figure this out. Otherwise, Jeffrey and I will just talk about thrift stores and cheap wine.
It's always good. Now, are you finding good deals this season online?
No.
I haven't really either, actually, I must say. Maybe I'm just looking for the wrong things.
Well, my Black Friday shopping experience was buying a new dishwasher because on Thanksgiving Day the dishwasher went kaput. So
it wasn't just that it stopped doing a good job; it just actually died.
Well, it started leaking, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably not something you can blame on government regulations, but dishwashers are increasingly non-functional as a result of bad detergents and low energy consumption. according to Department of Energy standards or EPA standards and all these things. So dishwashers are almost useless. And if the Obama regulations go through, which they probably won't actually, because the dishwasher makers really complained about it, they won't work at all. So yeah, we've got a dishwasher problem. We've got a dishwasher problem, and I haven't used dishwasher in years really because after they ruined the detergents, it just got too tedious.
Oh, I keep a big box of TSP.
Yeah.
And I just dump it in everything, just a little sprinkle, just
Yeah, it's the only way you can get anything clean at all these days.
Yeah.
It's certainly true with laundry. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I just sprinkle it in on top of the normal detergent.
Yeah, that's right.
A little fairy dust.
I have two articles out today, and they're both rocking it really hard. So.
Oh yeah, what about?
Well, one is about the Waze app, which is I recommend it to everybody. It's called
I love Waze.
Yeah, it's crowdsourced traffic information, so you can find out where the clogs are in the traffic. You can find the best way to get from here to there. It allows you to be a benefactor to other drivers by reporting things.
Yeah, but most people download it for one reason and one reason only: police.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you can report on the police that you see around, and it gives you a little rush of satisfaction that you're able to see a cop lying in wait, and you push a little button really quick on Waze, and you report him so that everybody else knows about him too. And it just
awesome.
It warms the cockles of my libertarian heart.
Using your First Amendment rights to actually save people money, and I don't know if you know this, but the sheriff's departments and police departments have lobbied very hard to force these app makers to take these functionality off the apps because they say that they're terrible. That they call them stalking the police. Yeah, but actually,
taste your own medicine.
Well, it's very interesting because if the police had really a fundamental interest in making the roads safer, Waze certainly does that. And when you hear about a police there, you do slow down. You do try to comply with all the traffic regulations and things. Mm-hmm. So they do have the effect. Waze does have the effect of making the roads a little bit more safe. So why are the police objecting? And of course, to ask the question is to answer it. We all know why, right? It's all
revenue.
It's about revenue, since the real
robbery.
But the irony to me is very interesting. It's like, so we hire the police. I mean, we hire them. We don't really, but the reason they exist is to make the roads safer. But actually, that's not why they're there. They're there to collect revenue from people.
Sure.
That's the actual reason. So they have every incentive actually to inspire to make sure that people are breaking the law, not keeping the law. So the public police have the exact opposite kind of incentive structure from a private company. They're seeking to make people non-compliant with the law so that they can ticket them and collect the revenue from them.
Right.
Whereas in a private situation, the goal of the police is to make the place safer for everybody. Obviously, to get rid of the troublemakers, to inspire people to do the right thing, so you can affect good social outcomes. The police actually have every institutional reason to favor bad social outcomes so that they can ticket more people and collect more money from them. So the police have exactly the opposite.
The great thing about Waze, though, I'm hearing an echo. Maybe that means Tom is coming on board. Anyway, about Waze, the great thing about it is it not only makes you drive safer because of cops that you're warned about, but you're also warned about potholes, vehicles stopped on the side of the road,
That's right.
Red light cameras you're warned about, and this is the big one. This is actually the most useful thing about it. Even though I downloaded it for speed traps, the most useful thing I found is construction zones and traffic jams. Waze, when you have Waze, you can report those things to other drivers around you so that it's a known issue in real time. And I have learned the hard way never to doubt Waze, because if if Waze is telling you to go a weird way, even if you know the way, you should always open up Waze, because if Waze is telling you to go some other way that seems crazy to you, just do it. Just do it because it knows. Waze knows.
Rachel,
it knows that there's
I
a traffic
totally
jam.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I doubted it the other day. I was driving along a highway, and it told me to get off the highway and take a different direction. I was like, that's not right. So I stayed on the highway, and sure enough, at some point, I landed in standstill traffic, you know, and it put me behind my route by up to about 45 minutes. And so I'll never doubt it again. I mean, Waze knows that, you know, you just do what it says, and don't ever doubt it. You know, I've
don't second guess. It's routing you around something if it tells you to do something crazy, and that's by the magic of
crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing. Yeah, in real time. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's an awesome app, and of course it's free. It was purchased by Google, and it really is it's just the thing. It's so safe. And yeah, speaking of I think early on you said it makes you sort of aware of what's going on around you. It's changed my habits of driving. I think since I got my driver's license, I've tended to see myself as a kind of a lone figure on the road, you know, like, and every other driver is a little bit of an obstacle. It's like I just want to get to where I'm going efficiently. And I haven't been very community minded. I've always speeded when I thought there were no police around. I've always just looked at everybody, and you know, I'm a little bit of a bad boy driver, you know. I was, you know, and not that I've intended to be, but you know, I just didn't ever have a kind of a broad sense. So Waze, though, is different, and as a result of Waze, I've developed a kind of a ongoing consciousness that we're sort of all in this together. You know, that everybody wants to get to where they're going in a fast way, in a safe way. And I've slowed down. I've become more conscious. I've been more polite. I've just been a little more aware of safety considerations, that sort of thing. So now I even if I know exactly the way home and everything, and I know there's no barriers or anything, I leave it on anyway, just as a kind of reminder that other people are out there doing things, and I like to be a benefactor to others, and I appreciate others, and I thank people for what they're doing for me, and so on. So it's changed my whole attitude. You know, so after all these years of driving, for the first time, I'm actually becoming a decent citizen. I mean,
it made you a better person.
It's made me a better person, actually. You know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tom, can you hear me?
He's there, but you still can't hear him.
What are we gonna do?
Well, I don't know. We can keep talking. I can tell you about my second article if you like.
Okay, we might get to that. Let me. Tom, can you hear me? Yes or no? Can you hear me? He can hear me. Okay. Is it possible that your headphones are plugged into the wrong jack or something like that? Is it possible? No, can't hear you. He is saying like the most wise, inspired thing, and I can't hear him. Oh. Okay, Tom. Keep trying, and we're gonna keep discussing Jeffrey's articles, and yes, and just keep talking, and when we can hear you, just we'll be interrupted, and that's fine. So.
But Rachel, it's always difficult to know what to write about, and what I write about is just sort of whatever I'm thinking about at the time. You know. I
awesome.
Don't write about much. But that Waze article just took off, and I think part of the reason is that a lot of people are using this app, and they were very glad for an article to explain why it's good. You know.
So, okay, so we just went through all the reasons why Waze is awesome and we love it, but your article was about what? About Waze?
It was about, how it is that the private sector has managed to sort of promote a community-minded road safety in a way in which the police never did. and it came
It
about
kind of speaks to the who would build the roads kind of thing. Who would
yeah,
make the roads safer? Well, Waze makes the roads safer.
it does. It makes the road safer and helps you as a driver. Whereas the cities have been trying to do this for 100 years and never
So,
managed to do it.
Jeffrey, over on Liberty.me, David Hagland is asking, Waze article is where? So if you have the window up, can you post the link?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm going to put it on Liberty.me soon. I posted another article today on Liberty.me. This one I posted on fee.org.
Oh, for fee, okay.
Yeah, since I write for them, every couple of days or so.
Are you going to Freedom Fest this year? Any plans?
It was the funniest thing. The Freedom Fest advertisement came out today, and I listed the featured speakers by alphabetical ordering, which put me like right next to whom? To Donald Trump.
No.
Yeah. So Donald Trump's a featured speaker, and I'm right next to him. Of course, I'm going to be deported if this guy gets in power. I mean, there's no question about it. I am target number one. This guy. I mean, my article was the first article to call him out as a fascist that appeared in July of this year. And a major Holocaust scholar in the University of Toronto who has a new book out and is one of the Western world's top experts on anti-Semitism and fascism, wrote an article for a Toronto newspaper that got massive international circulation that named me as the guy who was first to see the problems here with Trump. And so I was on the Canadian broadcast system, Canadian broadcast service, their equivalent of Morning Edition a couple of days ago, and to be interviewed on Donald Trump's fascism and how it is that I recognized it early on and perfectly forecast, his plunge into, the idea of registering Muslims and his ridiculous sort of fake game about being religious and so on and so on. How I called all this stuff, long before it all happened. So, I'm definitely on the radar screen of the Trump people. So if this guy gets, I'm first to go. So I'm going to have to, New Zealand's going to have to take care of me or somebody. Maybe I'll be in the Russian embassy in Moscow. I don't know.
Go hold some more koala bears.
It's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. So anyway, yeah, he's going to be at Freedom Fest as he was last year. And a defense of Mark Skousen, Mark's trying to run a good show. That's his goal. And he wants the best, most prominent speakers he can. Yeah. So people were upset with him for inviting Trump the first time, but I'm actually glad he did, because otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to really witness that his show.
Yeah, I'm totally fine that Trump was there. I'm fine for anybody to be there. You know, and people will either listen to them or go sit in some other breakout session. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm there to experience the intellectual stimulation, and Trump definitely provides that. There's no question.
Yeah.
No.
So he at least makes for good discussion. I mean, it doesn't bother me whoever shows up. I mean, the more the merrier, and I mean that in the broadest possible sense. Right. But I mean, there's so much to do at Freedom Fest, and there's so many other people to listen to. That if you don't want to hear Trump, don't hear Trump.
Well, and the other strange thing, Rachel, and it's something I'm sure you've observed because you're a bit of a social media maven. I guess why I would say the same thing about me is that you've got all these kind of people who call themselves libertarians now, favoring Trump as a president, like actively supporting him, supposed libertarians, doing this. Mm-hmm. So this is actually going on right now. I mean, right in our midst. So it's not entirely crazy at all that Trump would be the guy, that Trump would be invited, actually, because there are actually libertarians who think he's just the cat's meow. I don't agree with this, like at all. I think this guy's unbelievably dangerous, actually. And that was what my second article was about today, and I posted on Liberty.me. Just about Trump's fascism, what fascism is, how dangerous it is, and how awkward it is for libertarians that we're so unprepared intellectually to understand what dangers from the right look like. We get so upset about the left, the egalitarianism and the political correctness and the sort of love of government and the love of the establishment and so on, that we tend to be blind, really, to dangers from the other side, the anti-establishment, anti-PC, anti-leftist authoritarianism and statism of the right, which if you look at the heritage of libertarianism in the 20th century, you'll see that books like Road to Serfdom were explicitly warning that liberty faces a greater danger from the right than from we're not going to become Red Russia. It's not the socialists or the Russian-style socialism that threatens us. It's actually sort of interwar European-style fascism that's a much greater danger because it's much more appealing to the bourgeoisie. And so now, as Americans, we're just now being sort of introduced to this. And I'm not talking about fascist in just a purely pejorative sense. I mean in a technical, authentic, historically accurate sense. That's what Trump represents. And libertarians are just, I think, oddly blind to it, actually. Not all of them, but
I think
but there's some who
the issue is that we're so tuned into that anti-establishment, that anger, that we hear someone like Trump spouting it, and it's so appealing in a way that we don't hear what he's actually saying. Yeah,
that's right. And the first clue that I got was, of course, my thinking on this whole matter is trained very much under the brilliant mind of Ludwig von Mises, who wrote this book, Omnipotent Government, in 1944, and he lays out, what the fascist agenda is, and the first instance of it is the trade autarky and protectionism and demonizing all of the countries as being evil is a central kind of party platform of the fascist right. And so when Trump leads with that, that's a first indication. It's not proof, but when you follow that up with sort of nativist, anti-immigrant feelings, and then racialist dog whistles, and radical sort of demonization of the left, and pro-religious posturing, and also just outright authoritarian statism, which is what Trump's all about, and militarism, and the energy of the chief executive and so on. You put it all together, and it does amount to a kind of socialism without the parts that the bourgeoisie don't like. It's just a program for despotism, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's what clued me into what was going on, and then everything else.
How about now?
Sort of yep, we got you.
Oh,
Tom,
I'm sorry. Okay.
We hear you. Okay.
Well, it is my headphones, but they're the same ones I used the last time I was on this show. So I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know, but we hear you, so that's wonderful.
Is it okay for me to have this going through the air like this?
It's okay for me.
Sounds good. That sounds good.
Okay.
All
right.
See.
Sorry about that.
Not at all. So you talk for a while because I've taken up like half the show now. So
we're still going to have a discussion though, because I really want to hear about Tom's book. I don't know all that much about it except the title and the discussion that we had a few weeks back about that sort of needling question about when conservatives get the reins of government, how come government doesn't shrink? And you say, the most obvious thing in the world, which is because they don't want it to.
Yeah, I was kind of teasing with that article, and before we get into the book, I just want to my Aunt Joni keeps a list of everyone who calls her on her birthday and who was first, who was second, all the way down to 150. And I just want to say, I think I was the first one who read Jeffrey's article on Trump, whenever it was a few months ago, and like blasted it everywhere. This is it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, I love it.
It's awesome.
Anyway, so what the book is about is basically this. It's let's get into the way not what do conservative politicians do and say, but how do they think really, and what is the underlying philosophy. And really, the inspiration was the conservatives, because you've got all these movements, the Tea Party, and all over social media, you have things like the Rhino, very clever, right? Republican in name only, and they have this thirst for the true conservative, and part of my thesis is the true conservatives are in Washington. They've always been there, and I get into who are the philosophical lights of conservatism, and the very first one is Thomas Hobbes, who wrote Leviathan, saying, look, man is so bad, his nature is so dark and fallen, that we need a government all-powerful, with inalienable power, absolute power, preferably all in one person, undivided. And really, he is the philosophical bedrock of conservatism. And I think what you'd get from most people who really studied the philosophy of conservatism would say, oh no, we are more following the tradition of Edmund Burke, the constitutionalist, and Russell Kirk, his famous 20th century advocate, or however you want to say it. And I guess some of the things I show in the book are that really Hobbes and Burke don't disagree on very much. They both believe that for one thing, there are no inalienable rights. They don't believe in that. They don't believe that the government, seeing as they don't believe there are any natural rights that people take with them into society. So they, of course, don't believe that the government exists to secure those rights. And so it must exist for something else. And what Edmund Burke says, it exists to thwart man's desires and overcome his will in every space. So the chief difference between these two huge figures in conservatism, to me, are that Hobbes wants all the power in one place. And the one thing that Burke is different and better on is he wants the power divided between branches of government, state and local government, not states, we're in England, but in local governments and the national, to check, the power should check each other. The key thing here, though, is there's nothing left to the individual anywhere in conservatism. And when you listen to even constitutional conservatives that we like, at least better than the George Bushes of the world, you hear, no, that shouldn't be governed by the federal government. It should be the state government, or we should leave that to the local school board. But you don't hear them leaving anything to the individual. You'll never hear them make even an economic argument. They say they like the free market, but they really do want everything regulated. They just, it's just a matter of who's going to do it. So
yeah, that was a common refrain of Ron Paul in the the Ron Paul campaigns, is to leave as much as possible to state and local governments. So that is that an indictment of Ron Paul in a way?
Well, I would say Ron is really it's not de facto bad. Leave that to the state or local government, because Ron really does believe that much should be left to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
I see him and his son as being people that I would talk about in the book, not by name, but Ron really is a libertarian as far as I can tell. He doesn't go the last mile to say, look, let's just get rid of the government completely.
Well, that's an anarchist.
But he is a libertarian that believes much is left to the individual, where I think Rand really is what he says he is. He's a constitutional conservative, and at least the positions he's been taking and the way that he phrases things leads me to believe he's more like that. And or at least, and a great moment in the debate was, how can you be a conservative and want to spend $1 trillion on the military?
Yeah.
Well, it is a conservative thing. The British Empire was a conservative empire. So,
it's just that conservatives don't understand who they are.
well, I gave this talk back in, I think it was 2010, because this book was already, in the works back then. And an older guy came up to me and said, that was a good talk. He said exactly that. He goes, I don't know what I am anymore, but that was a good talk. Thanks a lot. He walked away.
So, Tom, let me ask you a question, and preface it with a quick story. I remember the first time that Murray Rothbard and I met with this sort of group of paleo-conservatives back in 1990, something like that. After our very first hour together, he sat down with me on a bench and he said, Jeffrey, the problem with these people is that they don't believe in rights. They don't believe in universal rights. They don't believe in universal individual rights. And if you give that up, you give up everything. And I remember being intrigued by that, thinking, well, but they have a lot of good positions on a lot of issues. Why would you say that? I've not forgotten that in the meantime. But I myself have had some doubts about this, and I tend to go back and forth on this whole question of universal rights. Where do they come from? What are they? How much would you say that believing in individual rights is essential to what it means to be a libertarian? And what are those rights? Are they just rights against the government, or the rights broaden out to any kind of positive obligations we have to others?
Well, you cut out for a second there, but I think how important are rights to being a libertarian?
Yeah.
Was that the first part of the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I get into in the book is the book is set up around what I call the American Creed, which is that little preamble in the Declaration that we are all born, or we're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that the government is instituted to secure those rights. So I compare what conservatives actually say, and even the people, the great thinkers in conservatism, to that. And I think they are very explicit. They don't believe in that. And Russell Kirk wrote this great book, The Conservative Mind, and surveyed every conservative he could think of for hundreds of years. And even people that you would think of as founding father types like John Randolph come out and say Jefferson was wrong to write that. We were wrong to believe him. He was a Pied Piper. We should, just take refuge in what the Burkeans call prescriptive rights, which means you only have a right to what's been established by long tradition. And it's the reason that we are conservatives. We want to conserve these long traditions that are our only bulwark against man's dark nature. I look at if you read the novel Heart of Darkness, that is the conservative philosophy, that if you strip away the constraints of society, man is basically a demon. So Jefferson was very explicit that, and he said he actually had a resolution passed that he got his idea of natural rights in nature and in society from Locke's second treatise. He calls it out. He's pretty explicit. So if you go through Locke's second treatise, you find basically that that preamble to the Declaration is just a summary of it. And the key point is, are there any rights that exist without government? And for the conservatives, it's all just mechanistic. It's you have a right to anything you can get away with. Hobbes says, well, you have a right to everything, including each other's bodies, without a government there. And Burke says almost the same exact thing. He says a right to everything. So they don't look at it as a moral principle. They look at it as, because there is no force there to stop you, you have a right to everything. Where, Locke and the people who followed him say no, reason leads you to the basically what we call the non-aggression principle today. You can find in Locke. He calls it the law of nature, that no one ought to harm another in their life, health, liberty, or possessions. So that was really a big moment to me, I think, in history. I can't find anybody who says something like that before then, and really nobody breaks any new ground until Murray Rothbard, in my opinion.
Okay, but today's conservatives are not really getting their ideas directly from Locke and Hobbes and Burke. Really? Where?
Well, they're not walking around with the book,
Right.
opening to page 73 and finding out what they're supposed to think. It's more the reverse. Hobbes and Burke and these people captured a way of looking at the world, and it's a way of looking at the world that's as old as human history, and people still view the world that way. That why does a conservative always side with a police officer, no matter how damning the video evidence might be? Because they believe that to go against the police officer is to take us back to the state of nature, where cars are going to be turned over and burning, and it's going to be chaos. And I think one thing that is true, though, is that today in the 21st century, there's a lot of people who have this jumble of ideas, and they'll say, yeah, I believe in inalienable rights, and I also believe that without the police, that we're going to have chaos. So I think that after the Democratic Party kind of, abdicated classical liberalism, libertarianism, that those ideas had to reside somewhere, and they've resided on the conservative side, jumbled up with the really true conservatism. But I think you could separate these things and say, here's one way of thinking, here's another.
Well, your comments about Russell Kirk are interesting, and I guess I hadn't fully realized, because he was a friend of mine, and I enjoyed his book too. And there's a way in which conservatism, does want to limit the state and not have a kind of a wild Rousseauian, sort of state on the march, and there's some appealing aspects to all that. But the truth about Russell Kirk is, as you say, he was really anti-liberal in the classical sense, and he had a fine nose for this. Like, he couldn't stand Jefferson and Locke in the classical liberal tradition, and Thomas Paine, and he drew very sharp distinctions between what he called the conservative tradition and what was in fact the classical liberal tradition of individual rights. At least it was very clear in his mind. And it's interesting how today we gloss over these differences, but Kirk did not.
No, he's very explicit that this is a mistake to go down this road. Yeah. And so are all the people that he cites. I mean, why did John Adams, oppose Jefferson so much? John Adams certainly wasn't a Hamiltonian. He wasn't somebody who wanted everything residing in one place, but he was a conservative as opposed to what I would call a libertarian. Now let's be very clear. Jefferson, Samuel Adams, the quote unquote libertarian people from back then did a lot of unlibertarian things, and it wasn't just slavery. They supported all kinds of horrible things. But these ideas were very new. The principle was very new, and it gets applied better over time. But you've got Jefferson saying in his first inaugural, we need a government that would stop us from injuring each other and otherwise leave us free to pursue our industry. That's the libertarian message, other than the government part. But I mean, that is exactly what most libertarians believe. The small government, limited government libertarians. So he says in the second inaugural, we have to preserve that state of property, equal or unequal, that results from each man from his industry or that of his father. So he gets rid of Rousseau right there, whose thesis was the government exists to restore the equality that's lost from private property. So I think you can make a strong case. This was a libertarian revolution against a conservative empire. I think Hamilton restored conservatism, because restore the British Empire in America, and he lost up until the Civil War, when it basically came back and never left. And your comment about Kirk is good. I point out in the book, Kirk says something about Jefferson's agrarian leveling or something like that, tries to paint him as a Rousseauian, and it's very disingenuous. But Kirk wants to see the world as conservatives versus today's liberals.
Yes.
He doesn't want to make any room for the libertarian idea.
So let me ask you this: Do you think in today's political dialogue and the paradigm that we operate under today, that I mean, here's a question. I mean, does liberalism in the old sense even exist anymore? Are we just so marginal? I mean, Does it exist within the Republican Party? Do you find us on the left? Do you find us on the right? I mean, where are we?
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to write the book and say these are three distinct ways of looking at the world. I don't think that you can say the libertarians are, a little bit right and a little bit left or anything like that. I don't say that that's what you are saying. I think we're a very small minority of society right now, but at one time, I don't separate classical liberalism from libertarianism. I just see classical liberalism.
By the way, I tend to agree with that. By the way,
yeah. It's libertarianism not as well developed. I mean,
right.
Adam Smith was not did not develop his ideas in the free market as well as they're developed today.
Right.
Neither was libertarianism then. So I make the argument that really this was a libertarian revolution in 1776, and it had to be re-won in 1800, and it pretty much lost in 1860 with Lincoln. And it was such a tragedy that the so many of the more libertarian southern states were also the slave states. It's this huge kind of contradiction that they lined up on, and it wasn't just that they were slave states; they dug in on that issue too.
Yes.
And because of that, I mean, really, the Republicans dominated the second half of the century. And by the time you got to Woodrow Wilson, the classical libertarian ideas were just extinct. Grover Cleveland was the last one, and a northern guy, by the way, from Buffalo. For me, my favorite president, maybe other than Washington, because he was a free market guy and he was hugely anti-war, under a lot of pressure to get into that war with Spain, and he wouldn't do it.
Well, what to you is the danger of what is today sometimes called conservatarianism, or the fact that we as classical liberals, which I have no problem calling myself that. I mean, even though, as you say, my own traditions, my own thought processes are a lot more radical than that, but that's the tradition under which with which I identify. What is the danger to you of having that aggregated in some sense with modern day conservatism?
Well, I tend to not be an absolutist about these things. I think it would be great to have a Burkean conservative republic compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
Even though that isn't ideal for me. I think, one of the things I talk about in the book is that the reason the American Revolution was successful was because you had libertarians and you had what we would call constitutional conservatives that were able to line up together against the Hobbesian kings, so to speak, in the empire that says all the colonies are her property. And it was that coalition that really, galvanized the revolution. I think we could do the same thing today. Sooner or later, we have to have this fight where, look, even the local school board doesn't have the right to tell me how to educate my kid.
Right.
Conservatives are going to fight you on that. But I'd rather have the local school board than, President Obama or President Bush. So I'm very practical. I'd love to see Rand Paul as president.
Yeah.
It would help.
But
whether
now,
you're libertarian or not.
But so I'd like to push back on that just slightly, because I think one of the problems with this kind of aggregated conservatarianism, where we see ourselves in alliance with conservatives, for the most part that works, especially as a coalition against the left. But what do you do, when you have clear and present dangers of somebody like Donald Trump come along? And you see the non-liberal right just rallying around him because he's wrangling leftist sensibilities so hard. He's so against the left establishment that it delights the conservative aspects of that sort of conservatarian coalition. And what do we liberals do in that case? And does it reach a crisis point in the sense that we finally have to just sort of say, look, conservatism represents as great a danger as leftism or social democracy as it's currently constituted?
Well, I mean, Trump, he's really just, to me, a demagogue. He's not, I don't know if he believes everything he says. I don't know that he would pass the test for a Russell Kirk of a constitutional conservative, a Burkean. He says many things that don't agree with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that you have to fight Trump, that you have to say this is the danger of conservatism as much as just the danger of the demagogue. And you have these people that are so worn out with political correctness. It's, you know, I actually really even like when he tweaks the media and says things that offends everybody.
Sure.
I love what he's against. I just hate what he's for, because what he wants to do is, you know, it's just horrible. I mean, and his ideas are saying there's so many capitalists that are terrible for capitalism, but I don't see that as a problem. I mean, I think, you know, Rand Paul is right on that. You know, this guy is not a conservative, not a true conservative. And what we'd be fighting with conservatives over is, you know, can people, is there a space where there's no power, not even from your local town supervisor? The conservative says no. We say almost all the space, yes. So and it would be great to have that fight. I mean, we're certainly 100 miles from there right now. So I'd love to get to that point, and that's all we have to argue about.
No, I think that's a very interesting insight. I mean, what would Russell Kirk say? I mean, looking back at it now, Russell Kirk, I mean, for all of his problems, and truly, his tradition annoys me. I mean, I don't like his anti-liberalism. You know, it troubles me. And yet, you know, when the neoconservatives were sort of running a U.S. foreign policy near the end of his life, you know, in the invasion of Iraq and everything, Russell Kirk was actually, you know, as much against the Iraq War as any libertarian I can think of, you know, because he saw it as a kind of a revolutionary, radical nation-building, democratic imperialism that very much offended his core his core sensibilities.
Can I ask one thing, Tom?
Yeah.
Are you frozen? Uh-oh.
No, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. I think we got you. You sort of discussed conservatives, and I mean, what really struck me was the whole worldview that comes from Leviathan, that human beings are just, you know, dark, and they need concentrated power to clamp down on them and control them, and that's, you know, the root of how conservatives view the world and humanity. And I think we understand how the classical liberal sees humanity. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on liberals? You know, how do liberals and progressives view humanity? You said there were 3 viewpoints, so what's the other?
Well, it's fun. It's great, you know, if you get into the book, and I hope my book will do is get people to read all these primary source works, because, you know, Hobbes sees man as completely fallen. Rousseau, I mean, when you read Rousseau, you hear Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Ted Kennedy, and just go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. This is the voice of 20th and 21st century, what we now call liberalism. And he doesn't see man as an angel, but he says that, you know, pre-society, or take all of society and government away, and he is this blissfully ignorant kind of Adam, innocent, barely aware of his fellow man, incapable of doing harm because he's, you know, wandering through the forest picking berries. And it's really quite a contrast from what Hobbes says nature would be like. Rousseau falls a little bit more into the state of nature being something way in the past, where, you know, the concept is really, even right now, if you took away the government, we'd be in a state of nature. What would it be like? But Rousseau says, okay, there was a stage of the state of nature before there was division of labor and private property, where it was like the Garden of Eden kind of ignorant, blissful ignorance. And it all ends the minute that somebody says, this is mine, and finds people simple enough to believe him. That's what he says. And it's because of the acquisition of private property that all the conflicts begin, and these inequalities that didn't start to arise. And for Rousseau, the purpose of the government, unlike Hobbes, which is to squash all of our dark nature, for Rousseau it's to re-equalize us, to restore the equality we lost due to private property. So, I mean, what do you hear from the Democrats? And that's income inequality. We need marriage equality. We need this equality, that. If you read Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it just jumps off the page that this is, again, I'm not saying they're carrying his stuff around, and look on page 44 and it tells me what to think about foreign policy. This way of looking at the world is their way of looking at the world. Absolutely.
So in other words, liberals are looking at the world and seeing that property and stuff and money corrupts, and conservatives are looking at the world and basically seeing that freedom corrupts. And then,
yeah, I mean, both sides say that when you enter society, you give up everything from nature has to be eradicated, and you give up any rights that you had there. Rousseau is kind enough in my book, because I'm comparing to the Declaration, right? So his passage, he says, you can reduce all of the laws of society to one, and that's total alienation of the individual together with all of his natural rights to the general will. So you can just take alienation of all your rights and put it next to unalienable rights, and you can cross off the liberals. No, they don't pass the test. You know, and I think that wouldn't surprise a lot of people. And really, a lot of liberals might probably tell you honestly, look, I don't believe the founding fathers. They were slave owners. Their ideas are 250 years old. We got to stop. You know, we've had to progress beyond that. It's the conservatives who, you know, I think are confused. But really, Kirk, Burke, everybody, Barry Goldwater says you have no other rights than what's written into the law, even in the conscience of a conservative. As late as the 60s, and as libertarian as he sounded on things, he does make that distinction. So really, you can't find this conservative who doesn't say that. You'll hear people say that they believe in it, but when on any issue, their interpretation is more what Burkean or Hobbesian, or both.
are we doomed?
No, I don't think we're doomed. You know, and I think you know, a lot of I think here's another thing I really do believe. When Ted Cruz, for example, talks about the free market and sounds very much like he believes in laissez-faire, I think on whatever issue he's talking about, he probably really does believe what he says. And 5 minutes later, he'll fall back on his conservative outlook and not realize the contradiction. And I think, if anything, the education, you know, we would strive for to at least let people see these are different ways of looking at the world. And on human nature, I think libertarians are the most realistic, because they see man as capable of good and evil. We don't believe, we're not pacifists. We don't believe in turning the other cheek, so to speak. We believe that force can be used against aggression, but that's it. And we believe that absent aggression, human beings will cooperate peacefully, and they usually do. And I think that's reality. They usually do. And do they always? Absolutely not. So,
well, I mean, I would just say, and you know, tell me what you think about this, but I would just say that a libertarian understands that there's both good and evil in people, and the market and society and interacting with your fellow human beings and trying to acquire what you need to survive and get along and whatever, that whole process brings out the best in people over time. In other words, if you cheat your fellow man, if you steal, blah, 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 you know, people will not want to do business with you. You'll get shunned. You know, there's various consequences that are built into, you know, society and the market that sort of punish the bad and reward the good in the long run. And that's how we deal with good and evil.
Yeah, and the dominant force is reason. I mean, when people rely on reason, they will find that it is in their best self-interest to respect the life and property of other people, because if everybody in the world respects the life and property of other people, they will be the best off. And so
your own property will be respected.
And I don't want to understate, libertarians believe in using force. I think we're wrongly painted as pacifists. And what do they say? Oh, well, you guys are utopian. I don't trust the big corporations to do the right thing. We're not looking to trust anyone to do the right thing. We are capable and willing to defend ourselves. We just don't believe you have a right to go on offense. And I think history also shows that when people are left free, this is when all the great things happen. I'm old enough to remember the 1990s when the internet was first taking off, the quote-unquote new economy, and all these Republican congressmen were complaining that we don't know how to regulate it because it's so new. And I was saying, well, duh, that's why it's working,
Yeah.
So, that happened because there was a space there where the market could work without being manipulated and intervened with. And we're looking for the next opportunity. Maybe it's drones, I don't know, space travel.
Yeah, what is the next opportunity? Past the internet. Is there anything beyond the internet? The internet is so vast. I thought I reached the end of the internet the other day, and then there was more.
But it is disturbing that there doesn't seem to be a constituency out there for classical libertarianism large enough that any existing politician has much of an interest in courting it. It's very troubling to me that out of all the Republican candidates, I mean, Rand, figured out pretty early on, even though he's got libertarian instincts, that libertarianism, as we understand it, was not powerful enough to get him the nomination. So he had to, find other constituencies to appeal to.
That's the reality.
Yeah, and it is the reality, and it's a very disturbing thing. Well, whether it's disturbing or not, it's something we have to come to terms with, I would say.
Well, it's just that I think we haven't reached the saturation level of our education efforts enough. I think if enough people were exposed to these ideas in the right way and asked the right questions, then yes, they would understand, hey, voting for Trump does not make sense based on what I actually believe, but they're just not being given the information in the right way and posed the right questions, and we're just not there yet.
Yeah, I find it's weird to be a libertarian in this world, actually, because like Tom was saying, you listen to somebody like Ted Cruz and he sounds or Fiorina is my favorite case of this. She gives great rants against government control of domestic economic situations, and then it comes to foreign policy, and she sounds like a Soviet central planner, and it's like, wait,
we need 436 bombers. We need 50,000 troops on the ground. We need.
Yeah, it's very strange. And it's like, how do you reconcile these things? I mean, like, how can the same person? It's like there's like a schizophrenia, or a bipolar disorder, at the heart of these. And it's frustrating to watch these debates. It's like, do you not care anything about some level of intellectual consistency? I mean, how can you stand up there and sound like a socialist central planner on foreign affairs, but a libertarian on domestic affairs? It's also haphazard and strange, and I don't know how they do it, except to the extent that you realize that really they're all just kind of trying to appeal to a certain constituency and make the best sort of pitch to some group. And they're not worried about consistency. They're just worried about appealing to certain groups. There's one of the things that's sort of more or less that people find appealing about Trump is that he doesn't seem to be courting anybody in particular. I mean, he got up in front of the American Jewish Congress, I think it was just today, and said, "I don't need your money, and you'll probably never support me for that reason. But I will support Israel, and I will support you, and everything else. But I don't want your money." And and it was kind of
That is
awesome.
terrifying, I think, to a lot of.
It's terrifying. It's awesome. It's in a weird way. We're in an awkward position because we're as alarmed by the corruption of the system as Trump is. On the other hand, we don't. Somebody on a post today I saw that said something like, "The other thing worse than a politician that owes everybody something is a despotic, power mongering, would be dictator who owes nobody anything." That's in a sense even worse. So we're in the awkward position of warning about this.
Well, I think,
money in politics. What could be worse than a politician that needs your money? A politician that doesn't need your money.
Yeah, exactly. It's an odd, it's funny because I don't know, Tom, if in the course of your reading for your book you bumped into now what is one of my favorite books actually, and every latest book I've read becomes my favorite book. But I read for the first time Machiavelli's The Prince, and he talks about this.
Use it for the book, but
what?
I did read it, but I didn't use it for the book for.
Okay. Yeah, it's an awesome.
Probably.
Right, he talks about. I mean, in a way, he was writing in the early 16th century, really 1513, something like that. But if he were writing today, he might be talking about somebody like Saddam Hussein or Jeb Bush or something like that. It's about the same type people, right? I mean, just the importance of putting together a broad-based coalition of interest groups that have kind of hooks and have an interest in sustaining your power, in a way of sort of stabilizing it and making you immune to challenge. The broader your base, the more likely it is that your rule will be sustainable. And he believes very strongly, of course, in Leviathan-style control of society. I mean, as a matter of fact, he recommends very strongly you eliminate all your political enemies, with extreme prejudice as fast as possible, so that you can have sort of peace and prosperity in the kingdom. There's an element of liberal republicanism in
well, he wrote a great Republican treatise on when somebody else was in power. So he really would write whatever he thought would please the powers that be.
That's probably right.
And I haven't read The Prince since college in the 1980s, But I also remember that he said, if I'm remembering correctly, that if you conquer a territory with people that had lived under a tyrant, then you can just kind of move in and resume rule. But if you conquer a people that had been previously free, you have to crush them and salt the earth kind of thing. So
that's Machiavelli.
That was an interesting, something that stuck with me now for, I don't know, 30 years. So. But the other thing I thought I had is that as bad as things are and as much power that has accumulated in the executive, there is still some limits there. And if Trump, I don't think Trump will win the general election if he gets the nomination. If he did, he'd be highly entertaining. He would piss off all the right people. I mean, all the other people that we don't like, he would just be a thorn in their side. And I don't know how much. I don't know that he's going to be a big interventionist overseas. I don't know. He said both things. He said we should invade in Iran and take their oil. And then
but is it possible he could resist the opportunity to at least negotiate first? He's such a deal maker. I mean, he's better at making deals, and like sending bombs is kind of a new thing to him. Maybe he'd rather go with what he's comfortable with. And as pompous as he is, maybe that would be better.
It's all possible, and to some extent we're all just kind of speculating here. But one thing I think we tend to forget about guys like this is that power is an intoxicant in a way.
Yeah.
So if he gets the laurel wreath on his head, and he
on his toupee.
Yeah. If he arrives with a mandate and a vision, I worry about his temperament. And let's face it, folks. I mean, in the course of the 20th century, we have had a number of major global political crises that resulted from people seizing power, and half the people who supported him said, "Well, he's not going to be that bad. I think he's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it." So this always haunts me slightly when we talk about Trump. And I too, when I listen to him speak, sometimes I think, well, it's not going to be so bad. He's a deal maker. He's a practical politician. But there's something funny about power. I mean, look what it did to both George Bushes, actually. They both sort of came into office with a little bit of a humble spirit.
But then again, his money has given him so much power. There's the thought that maybe this is as corrupted as he will get. This is as jerky as he's gonna get because he's always had so much power. But
that's an interesting point. In fact, at his speech today, he made a funny point. He said one of the reasons that when these guys become newly minted senators or congressmen or presidents, that they tend to lose their minds. He said that they enter for the first time into sort of a world of opulence, where there's the Secret Service, and they're impressed by the marble columns, and they get sort of overcome with a sense of everything I believed before. I just now have to put on the shelf because I'm in a different world now, and they change. And he did just a hilarious sort of send up of what happens when people get power, And so maybe you're right, Rachel. I mean,
I don't think I'm right. I'm just saying that's probably what's occurring to people.
Yeah.
Is that he's as bad as he's gonna be because
he can't possibly get worse. If anything, he looks down on government relative to his own casino in Las Vegas or whatever.
Sure. I mean, he doesn't want to live in the White House. That little shack. No, he doesn't want that.
That's true. The Oval Office is just trash to him probably.
He made a comment about that, didn't he? Say early on, he didn't know if he'd move in or not. It's a little small.
He'll rent it out. He'll make it into a hotel. He'll gold plate the front columns. Put Trump on the front. Just temporary, of course, till he leaves. But yeah, he can make some money on the property.
Sell it, privatize it,
Yeah.
It. Trump buys it himself. Yeah.
What could be more libertarian than that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Trump's my guy now. No.
Well, this much I must say, people. One of the odd things about fascism is that it takes on a different character in every country where it lands. So it's Argentina, Spain, Italy, Germany. It's always taken on a different character. So when it finally lands in America, to me it makes some degree of sense that it would, the El Duce would be a reality TV star and a successful.
It does seem appropriate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's totally our character. The only thing is he's not carrying a Bible and he's got a cross behind him. That's the only thing,
Well, he's funny about the whole Bible thing, and I wondered, as a kind of full-blown fascist that he is, I knew that he had to make his peace with religion at some point because that's what they do. And I wondered what form it would take, and it's just so funny the way he did it. He said, some people say that this is the best book they've ever read, and he holds up his own, Art of the Deal, right? He goes, but I disagree. I think it's the second best book. The best book is the Bible. That's what he says. That's what he said. And the bourgeoisie are cheering. It's just
right. Oh my God.
People are so gullible, and he just knows how to sell himself. Kind of awesome.
If you detach yourself from this is happening to me,
right,
in my country, this is about to be visited upon me in my world. If you detach yourself from that.
Yeah, if you treat it as reality television, it's kind of.
This is House of Cards, if you watch it like you watch House of Cards, yes.
It's
fantastic.
All delightful.
Oh my goodness.
Just delightful. Yeah. and then you read F.A. Hayek's Road to Surf, and you're like, oof. This is getting scary.
This is why people don't like to read that stuff.
And also, to Ron Paul's credit, Ron Paul has been awesome on the Donald Trump issue. I mean, he's been warning he's the worst existing candidate. He said he's a pure authoritarian, that he's against free trade and free migration, and you know, that's so he's
eminent domain, all of that.
Ron has just been so outspoken on the Trump issue. You know, I'm not sure if anybody's listening to him or not, but I think it's awesome the way he's shown a lot of courage in that respect. So I really
that's the thing. I don't know if anyone's listening to him or not either. And
just proof that he's the real deal. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, it's funny because that's another big part of the conservative outlook. We haven't talked a lot about economics, but you know, when you look at history, Ron is out here saying no, protectionism is wrong. Okay, I thought we believed in the market.
Yeah.
Conservatives have been protectionists since there's been economics. I mean, they again, Burke was a protectionist, supported the British tariffs that caused the Irish potato famine. I guess I should be glad they did that, or I might not be here today. But I mean, right through to Hamilton, to Lincoln, to even the 20th century, there was this very brief time where some of the classical liberal ideas resided in the Republican Party. But I mean, even when George Bush in 2000 gets elected, what is the first thing he does? He puts a tariff on steel. I mean, it's like they've never changed their tune in hundreds of years. And of course, Trump is hammering that hard. Second to immigration is, oh yeah, we need to go out and make tougher trade deals. And where a libertarian would say, even if they have tariffs, we shouldn't put up any. We'll still be better off, which we would be and are. The conservative mind sees the economy as a war, just like everything else is a war. And listen to their rhetoric. Listen to Republican politicians making the case for the free market. They don't make the case for the free market. They make the case for winning. Like Trump really hammers it, but they're always talking about we should do this because it makes a strong economy. It makes us stronger. It's all about the collective. It's never about because this is a right of the individual to make his own choices. So, I mean, I think these things keep jumping out. Ron Paul is great because he just won't. He doesn't care if he loses the whole election on one answer. He'll just say what he thinks, and that's what I always loved about him.
Yeah, that's heroic.
He's never missed. In my opinion, he's never missed.
No, and his education formation came about as a young man through Hans Sennholz at Grove City College and pamphlets from the Foundation for Economic Education, and that's his formation. It was that Leonard Read fee, sort of anything that's peaceful style American classical liberalism. That's what he is, and that's what he's always been.
Have either of you read Stephen Kinzer's Overthrow? About it details 13 governments that the United States overthrew between, I think, the 1890s and modern day, like through Iraq. That really goes into this idea of protectionism through war. It starts with, pineapples in Hawaii, and for dole fruit. And Guatemala and all of these South American countries and all of these governments that we've overthrown sort of at the behest of big corporation, big business. And if you read that and then you understand how and it's mostly conservatives, and if you understand that that's what you were saying, Tom, about how they think about the market is a war, a battlefield, and then you understand that the battlefield today is oil. I hate to bring it up almost because it's like all conspiracy theory, but I mean it sort of starts to make sense.
Yeah.
We have to conquer the oil marketplace through war. And then terrorism becomes this fantastic tool, this marketing, this propaganda tool in order to achieve those means and get the people behind those wars that we need to do. And Syria is all about this pipeline that Assad does not want. through his country for whatever reason, I don't know. But we have to, you know, turn him into a terrorist and go bomb him. You know, it all starts to make a little bit more sense.
Well, it's naive.
The oil thing is never. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Go ahead.
No, you please, Tom.
The oil thing has never made much sense to me, and I felt like my ideas about it were confirmed by the Iraq War, the George Bush Iraq War, in that, you know, think of the scariest jihadists taking over all the oil in the Middle East, and let's say we were even more dependent on it than we are today. I mean, we're going to be exporting oil next year, but even back then, it's still no good to them unless they sell it. And the way that you know, definitely, you know, lay people and even the politicians talk, it's almost as if presidents are trading oil by the barrel between nations. That's not how oil gets sold. It's sold on exchanges, just like stocks and bonds. And even if the terrible, you know, evil jihadists were controlling the oil, all they could do with it is sell it to the exchange. It's not going to make any difference who controls it. And when we went in there and said, we're going to take over the oil, and we were terrible at it. You know, gas prices went up because we destroyed the infrastructure that was there, and it never recovered.
You know, Tom, you put your finger on something that's troubled me most about Trump's rhetoric. He truly does talk as if the U.S. government is responsible for making all trade happen around the world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Will decide whether or not there can be a car factory in Argentina owned by Detroit. You know, that he'll say yes or no to this, or whether or not Apple can keep its can keep some subsidiary in Finland or whatever. I mean, and the oil situation, it's very strange. I mean, he acts like he's actually engaged in an economic takeover of the United States, you know, and like as if the market doesn't actually exist. It's the strangest thing, and unfortunately, you know, most Americans are so completely ignorant about the way international trade works that they actually, you know, can sort of go for this and believe this nonsense.
Yeah, there's not much thinking about cause and effect, in my opinion, and there's one thing that I've always, you know, a subject I would love to get into with environmentalists about private property, because what it reminded me of is Trump thinks he's going to run the United States like he runs one of his companies. You know, like the CEO. We don't work for the government. You work for us, but. It's the same kind of thing. There's an analogy there to the environmentalists. I want to grab every environmentalist in America and say, stop giving your money to politicians, pool it, and buy private property, because on private property you are the absolute ruler. That's what libertarians believe. And you can make a no oil zone on your own land, and it could be hundreds of miles long and wide. And wouldn't that, you know, be a much more effective way than going to some politician who really doesn't care about this anyway, in reality, and trying to get this tiny incremental little change when you could just be the king of your own land? I mean, 40% of all land in the United States beyond the Mississippi west of the Mississippi is owned by the government. You know, they should be lobbying to buy up all that land and then say you can't drill oil here.
You're so right about that, and the U.S. government buys this land, and then they lease it out to private contractors, you know, to develop in ways the environmentalists actually object to. So it doesn't actually make, you're right, it doesn't make any sense even from their own point of view.
Yeah, they would be much better stewards of the land than the government. They should put their efforts towards raising money, having a bake sale.
That's right.
And buy the land themselves, and then they can do what they want with them. I mean, why would you trust the government? But, you know, they're liberals. They don't think that way.
Well, again, remember what the core principle of liberalism is, which is that there is a illegitimacy to any private property. I mean, it's the original sin for the religion of liberalism.
But they would be buying it for a collective, right? So it wouldn't be like private, but they would hold it in trust.
Well,
right?
my
Like an
pitch
environmental trust, right?
my pitch, it's better if it's owned by one person, you know, because then you don't need. What if part of the collective wants to drill oil? You're right back to square one. I mean, this is the problem with private or with public property, is that it belongs to everybody, so it belongs to nobody. So, hey, Exxon is part owner of the land too if it's public, so they should have a say. By your own principles, Mr. Liberal, your absolute democracy that you want, they should have a vote. Well, on your
Yeah.
so why don't you just buy it?
All right. Well, you guys, it is now almost 11 o'clock. I wanted to go over a little bit because we spent so much time not having Tom on, but it is getting late, so I think I need to let everybody go to bed, including myself. So this has been a fantastic discussion. In spite of our technical difficulties to begin with, it's been wonderful. So thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much, Jeffrey.
My pleasure. Good
All
to
right,
see
thank
Rachel
you
and Tom.
both.
It's a good night. Thank you.
And we'll have a video coming soon, so thank you so much.
All right.
Night night.
Good night.